With MLB free agency quickly approaching, all eyes in Braves country are on Max Fried, who most expect to sign elsewhere. And when you're talking about teams that he could potentially sign, there's a lot of teams where you're like, please just do not sign there. It starts with the NL East, right? It's the New York Mets, who obviously have a big need. I mean, the Mets are in the NLCS somehow, in spite of their pitching. I mean, let's be real about who they're starting, I believe, in Game 3, which is Luis Severino. I mean, Luis Severino was on a milk carton for about 3 or 4 years, and he had a decent little bounce back year. Most importantly, he stayed healthy, but we're talking about a guy with like a close to 4 ERA starting in Game 3 of the ALCS as the Mets' number 2 pitcher behind Sean Manaea, who is having a revelation. I mean, they need pitching as bad as any team needs pitching, and nobody has deeper pockets. Like, if you're talking about who's going to offer Max Fried the most money, if I'm Steve Cohen, I'm like, here's $200 million. I don't care. Who cares?
I mean, somebody could be, just throwing out ballpark numbers. Just, Steve Cohen, here's Dodgers, here's Phillies, go, I'll give, $200 million. Steve Cohen feels like the kind of guy who can and will go, I'll go 220. Yeah. I don't care. Like, it does not matter to me. I'm taking him from the Braves. Also, Max Fried is a hell of a pitcher. It's not like this is just some guy. I mean, Max Fried over the last 4 or 5 years has been arguably the best lefty on the planet. So it's also like, it's not just throwing your money away, but, if Steve Cohen feels like the biggest threat, in my opinion, if that's who they decide they want.
I definitely agree. I mean, the Phillies will probably be in
They got deep pockets, too.
They have deep pockets. I think they have bigger holes to fill than their starting rotation. Their bullpen struggled this year. Their offense, particularly in the outfield, I mean, I imagine the Phillies are probably going to be a sneaky suitor in the Juan Soto sweepstakes, which, God, that would be hell. But I definitely see them potentially being suitors in those sweepstakes. I hope the Yankees went out, but the Mets are also going to be involved.
What a loser move to lose. I mean, you're the Yankees. It doesn't matter what the price tag is. You have to get him.
Don't know why the Yankees wouldn't match any offer.
Every single one. I mean, if you're Steve Cohen at that point, you go, all right, we'll see how far you'll go.
They're as close to a World Series, and they could potentially win the World Series as they've been in the last 2 decades. I mean, they are 2 wins away over inferior opponent.
A terrible AL though.
And Juan Soto is having a fantastic postseason. A guy who shows up in October. He
was born to wear the pinstripes.
In my opinion, he is the best, most consistent offensive player that the 100%. Game has had over the last 5 years, and he does it on the biggest moments as well as anyone. I don't know why. And you're the Yankees. You're a $10 billion organization. Yeah. Like, what could you possibly lose by signing that and contending in October in like you said, a bad American League year after year? It makes absolutely no sense. But if I'm Steve Cohen, I'm throwing every single penny. Yeah. And guess what? The Mets coming into this season, I know we're just kind of getting sidetracked. The Mets coming into this season had a lot of questions about, the stability of the organization and all that stuff. And would Juan Soto really want to go to that mess that they had on the other side of New York? All of a sudden, they might be in the World Series. And that's without half the talent. I mean, they're going to be able to load up this offseason with free agents, maybe a Juan Soto, maybe a Max Fried. So, there's stuff to like, about the New York
100%.
Mets that wasn't there initially. But back to Max Fried, right? Then you obviously have the Dodgers, the hometown team. They make a lot of sense. They are another team that has absolutely no pitching and is somehow this advanced this far. They could desperately use Max Fried alongside Shohei Ohtani, and all of a sudden they would have a rotation going into next season, and we know about their deep pockets. All those make you want to puke, right? Like, absolutely want to puke. Please go to the American League. And Lucas Giolito, Max Fried's high school teammate, him, Jack Flaherty, and Lucas Giolito all played at Harvard Westlake, which is just absolutely insanity. I mean,
so crazy. Imagine looking back and being like, honey, I used to play against
those and
you're selling like insurance now.
I mean, Jack Flaherty, before all the injuries, and now he's one of the Dodgers' premier pitchers in their rotation, was one of the best pitchers in baseball, one of the best young pitchers. Max Fried, obviously, we know might be the best left-handed pitcher, and Lucas Giolito has dealt with injuries, but this is a guy who has a no-hitter under his belt and has had a great career. Lucas Giolito is actually recovering from an injury. He's on the Boston Red Sox. He has already said, he has talked about on the Baseball Is Not Dead podcast, talked to Max Fried. It said, hey, this is something we talked about since high school. Now we have a chance to make it come to fruition. Obviously, Boston, they've been hesitant to spin. We know they have money. Will they finally be willing to say, hey, let's go out there and try to win again? Or maybe they just say, hey, let's punt this season. I don't really know what Boston's doing. They definitely need pitching. They could use Max Fried. And if you're talking about, the
ideal.
Yeah, ideal. Like, go to Boston. Like, that's fine. Go to American League team.
Any American League
Even
team
the
is
Yankees.
ideal. Yeah, I wouldn't care. I mean,
I don't like the
there are
Yankees.
some Braves fans who absolutely despise the Yankees. Those who suffered through the 90s, we won a bunch, just never got over the hump other than that one time. But for me, it's literally anybody other than the Mets, Phillies, and Dodgers. And then I guess, maybe 4 would be the Cardinals. But Red Sox, Orioles, the Padres, even, that's a National League team. I wouldn't hate it. The Mariners don't need pitching. The Giants, I wouldn't love, but I wouldn't hate it as much as those other 3. Like, literally any other team than the Mets, Phillies, and Dodgers, and I could swallow that pill some way or another. I mean, the Red Sox would be a dream because, first of all, the Red Sox are, one of the most historic baseball teams ever, and you wouldn't have to face them but a couple times a year. You would see them, and the only time you'd ever see them in a meaningful game is in the World Series.
Yeah. And you don't want to see him in a World Series. We've seen that.
Yeah.
But
every other playoff game.
I agree. Like, if you're looking at the Max Fried situation realistically, right? And he's probably gone.
He's gonna go to one of those 3 that suck.
You're just hoping that it's not one of those 3, right? You're sitting here and you're like, hey, the Yankees need pitching. They definitely need pitching. But they got their eyes on Juan Soto, and that's what I think is the most interesting aspect in all this. Is all these teams that we're talking about that have deep pockets that could be interested in Max Fried. Don't count the Dodgers out on Juan Soto.
God,
I mean, seriously, don't. Like, why would you? They literally go out there and buy every single player.
That's
why would you?
Scumbag rich kid behavior.
Well, you know what?
They are.
If you had that money,
I would be. Screw you guys.
I would have my little all-star team.
You're right.
And like,
you're right.
We're the greatest show on.
Cry more. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Sorry, poor. You poor.
Yeah.
You poor.
Yeah, we are.
You poor over there. But don't count the. And so I think a lot of that will determine. Do they pivot to Max Fried after Juan Soto? A team like the Mets could probably do both, but like, I think Juan Soto, watching that domino fall will determine a lot with what happens with Max Fried.